And I welcome everyone to Press TV's news review program, where we get in-depth in one of the day's top stories. Now, North Korea has condemned its neighboring South and the United States over plans to conduct large-scale military exercises. North Korea's foreign ministry says that Washington is to blame for the collapse of international arms control systems, adding Pyongyang's nuclear weapons are a just response to ensure the balance of power in the region. It also said the Korean peninsula is turning into the world's biggest war game stage due to a military expansion scheme led by the U.S. and its allies. It warned military buildup by Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington raises tensions to an extremely dangerous level and crosses a clear danger line which Pyongyang will not tolerate. Now, the U.S. and South Korea plan to conduct drills from March 13th through the 23rd. The North says such military drills are a rehearsal for invasion and has called for the UN to demand an immediate end to the war games. And now joining us for the program is Gloria La Riva, activist and political analyst, joining us from San Francisco, California, and Eric Wahlberg, author and journalist, joining us from Toronto, Canada. Hello, and I'd like to welcome you both to the program here. Now, Ms. Gloria La Riva, we will start with you. Welcome to the program, ma'am. The North has said it's going to give an unprecedented response if this year's war games go ahead as planned. Your initial thoughts on what the North is calling extreme provocation it has to deal with year in and year out?
Yes, well, the war games are being preceded in January by an announcement by Secretary of Defense, who said that they will be bringing in bomber fighters and missiles into South Korea, which is a definite provocation. But the U.S. has been in an almost continual aggression against North Korea. And although it was suspended for 5 years when the Full Eagle was canceled, that now they're going to be having two simultaneous exercises. And this is a great danger to a country that was bombed mercilessly for 3 years from 1950 to 1953. It is Korea that is endangered by the U.S., not the other way around. And Korea has the right to defend itself from the U.S. war exercises, which is only a prelude to war. They're not conducting exercises to use up weapons. They're preparing for war, and we have to see it in the context of the U.S. declaration that there will be major power confrontation with Russia and China.
Thank you, ma'am. And Eric Wahlberg, welcome to the program there, Eric. Now, Ms. Gloria La Riva made a pretty interesting point there, and I'm sure you've heard it before, Eric, that at what point does Washington entertain the fact that these war games are instigating the North and it's a provocation, and if it really wants peace, all it has to do is basically halt these war games, these annual war games. The recipe for peace here is relatively simple, Eric, unless, of course, it's not what Washington is after.
It's exactly the same as in what the U.S. was doing over the last 20 years in Ukraine, right? Since the 1990s, the U.S. has been infiltrating and pouring billions of dollars into its new colony, is what Ukraine, that was going to be the new colony. And what they needed was to provoke Russia to protect the Russians. I mean, it's what they're doing now in the South China Seas is they're provoking North Korea to do something, and then they can attack. It's a war game. It's not so much a game as a provocation, just as the provoking in Ukraine created the war scenario there. They seem to want a war scenario in Korea, very much like they have in Ukraine. What they did in Afghanistan, I guess they figure Afghanistan is collapsed. It's no longer of interest to them, so they moved on to these other war games. So and this is these are the Democrats. They always start the wars in the United States, and they just make a mess, and then this is another one of these Democrat hawks that he was not, he didn't advertise himself as a hawk. He was going to pull back on Saudi Arabia. He was going to make up with Iran. And what did he do? He went around and he turned out to be a warmonger against all the other nations, virtually. Anyone that blinks at the United States gets a feeling of the U.S. fist.
Thank you, Eric. And Ms. Gloria Lariva, we know the U.S. in time again said that Kim Jong-un is a madman. He has his people believing that the U.S. has this imminent attack it's going to make on us. Seriously, if that is not the case, and if Washington wants to make the case that that is not the case, why do you have these annual war games with the most sophisticated weaponry you have in your arsenal, the best fighter jets you have 40,000 of your own soldiers there right across the DMZ line carrying out these games annually, along with another 10 or 15,000 South Koreans, 10 or 15,000 Japanese are obviously invited to get involved now. You have 50 or 60,000 soldiers with the gnarliest hardware on the planet conducting these war games, and then you're telling the other side, hey, don't listen to your leader. He's a madman for thinking that we are a threat to you.
Well, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, known as North Korea, has always been the subject of the most outlandish, outrageous media propaganda, hysteria, and demonization of Kim Jong-il, of Kim Jong-un, to the present right now. And the last war exercises, which were extensive, one of the officials quoted in the U.S. military, the U.S. military official, said at the time of Full Eagle, he said, we're practicing to decapitate the leadership. And they're talking about destroying North Korea. It's something that they were not able to do at the end of 1953. But I've actually been to North Korea twice. I was there in 1989, and I was there in 2015. One of the last trips before the Trump administration made it illegal for Americans to travel to North Korea, which is really, why don't they want us to see that country? It is a socialist country. It's a country where healthcare is free and where housing is free. People don't even pay for the housing. But in order to demonize a country that is sovereign, that is independent, you have to create a mockery of the leader. And so that's what we see day in and day out in the United States. And very sadly, people don't even know, even older people who were alive at the time, aren't even aware of what the effect of the Korean War, and that there was even a Korean War, that 37,000 Americans died, that more than 2 million, between 2 and 3 million Koreans died in the carpet bombing of 3 years. And so Korea has a reason for worrying about war. They have a reason when they say, as I said, that their leader is going to be decapitated. And that John Bolton a few years ago said, the best policy for North Korea is no North Korea, meaning destroy it.
Thank you, ma'am. And that's a good point, Eric. I mean, if war ever breaks out on the Korean Peninsula, we know that the U.S. and their cronies are going to try to write history as to put blame on the North for it. Yet we're watching this thing unfold for the last, to Ms. Lariva's point, since the Second World War, since the Korean War, when they got carpet bombed, all the way till present day. The U.S. has done nothing to diffuse tensions. It's put the most crippling sanctions on the North. We hear all this rhetoric about its leadership and that they love to assassinate Kim Jong-un. My question to you, and the war games, nevertheless, the U.S. could do a lot more to diffuse things. They're not. They're putting themselves and the South Koreans in a situation where it's a recipe for war out there. Are you concerned that war will break out eventually if this kind of policy of isolating North Korea and then coming right up to it on its doorstep and provoking it gets out of hand?
Well, I like what happened last December. Kim Jong-un has a sense of humor. He sent 5 drones over the demilitarized zone, and they were buzzing around for several hours. And then there was a cat and mouse chase, and the South Korean pilots ended up crashing, and they lived. But I think that there are these moments that you see the humor and the silliness of, nothing really happened because of that, and yet there was this violation of. I think it was a very interesting way of just showing the silliness of this standoff. So I have to commend. And also, Kim Jong-un, he donated a dog that is native to the area of, it's a special North Korean breed. And it became a cause célèbre in Seoul. And people line up to see it, and there's this beautiful dog, and it's breeding now, and they're giving puppies away. There are these moments, and you're right, the U.S. does nothing. The U.S. has a brain dead, it's tone deaf. It can't hear melodies. There are melodies, and the U.S. just hears war and bombing. It's really very dangerous because these Democrats, they really would love one of these drones. Could you imagine if Kim Jong sent a drone over the war games? Well, they're invade. That's probably what they've got in mind. They're looking for a provocation that they can just, like that, start something.
Thank you, Eric. And before we wrap it up, Ms. Ladiva, I want to get this last question out to you. You mentioned the lull in nuclear testing and missile testing for a few years under Donald Trump's. We saw the couple of summits they had. I mean, it seemed, and the North just wanted sanctions relief. They're willing to denuclearize something that supposedly is a big stickler for Washington, and the door was open, the windows were all open. Why did Washington not seize that opportunity if it was that important for it to get that opportunity?
Well, the U.S. and North Korea entered into an agreement in the 1990s under Clinton when there was almost a U.S. war against North Korea because Korea was developing a nuclear power plant. And the U.S. agreed with Korea that it would give up its development of a heavy water reactor, which was able to create plutonium easier, in exchange for a light water reactor that the U.S. would help build and develop. And the U.S. never honored it. The U.S. never honored it. It was a moment of peace, but in reality, the U.S. military war drive is on a march against Russia, against China, and of course, North Korea is very strategic. But even separate from the Chinese situation, the U.S. has been very unhappy that they were not able to take over the North in the Korean War. The North Koreans were able to stop that and create an armistice. It's still in a state of war. We should keep that in mind. The Korean people want to be united. It's one country, and only the occupation of U.S. troops, thousands of U.S. troops, has kept that 5,000-year-old culture divided in two. And we say U.S. troops out of South Korea.
All right, good stuff. I want to thank you both for joining us in the program. Stay safe to the both of you. Mr. Eric Wahlberg there joining us from Canada, and Gloria Lariva there, political analyst, joining us from San Francisco, California. And viewers, that brings us then to your Press TV's News Review program. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye for now.